Good morning, everyone. I'm Nancy Berger with the Fear Finding Project, and you are joining Ask Nancy, my monthly live stream where I chat with people I think are cool about things I think are cool, mostly leadership, how we overcome fear-based thinking, how the brain works, and how we can change our thoughts and change our experience. So today, I'm thrilled to have my good friend, Dan Berg, who, fun fact, is a slam and bass player. And I have played in bands with Dan over the years. But who knew he's also a smarticle that knows all things tech CEO, how weird corporate culture can become in certain situations. So I thought it would be awesome to have Dan join me so we can talk about this topic of neuroplasticity. Dan has a lot of experience in the tech world. I'm going to let him introduce himself. And for anybody who might be watching the replay, I want to thank you for joining us. We didn't get any questions submitted for this one, but we don't need them, Dan. We have plenty to talk about. So tell our audience a little bit about you and what you do in this world.
Yeah. So Nancy, thanks for having me. It's super fun to be here. Look, long story short, I started my career a gajillion years ago as a software engineer. So I'm a tech guy at heart, kind of climbed through the management ranks for the last 20 years or so. I've been in CTO roles, chief technology officer roles in small, medium-sized companies, typically venture funded, PE backed, things like that. And what I have learned over the years, wearing the senior most tech hat, is that it's usually not all about technology, software. It's this combination or this intersection of technology, people, organization, process, and product strategy or business strategy. And kind of the confluence of those is either A, where all the magic happens, or B, where things go wildly off the rails if they're not properly aligned.
And wildly being the operative word there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So just to finish the thought, about a year ago, I decided I think it's time to kind of hang up my hat when it comes to being a full-time CTO working for one company and to spread the wealth. So I've been doing a bunch of work building a consulting and advisory practice where I can come in and work with companies, with VC firms, with PE firms across their portfolio and help as an advisor, as a coach, as a mentor, as an untangler of Gordian knots, all that sort of thing.
If Intersect Advisory Group is the consulting business that Dan has launched, so if you're wildly off the rails and watching this, you have to reach out to Dan, and we'll make sure you know how to get in touch with him at the end here. But I'm fascinated by this intersection, of technology. Oh, and there we are in Boston, downtown. So you hear all the sirens. The intersection of technology, humanity, process, and because the process word is kind of loaded, right? It's like the processes that go on in a company, but also the processes that go on inside of us and how we respond to what's happening to us. And that brings us to this topic today of neuroplasticity. What does that mean? It means that we can rewire our brains. So Dan, speak to this issue of how, when you go into a company, what is kind of the angle at which you approach it? How do you approach this intersection point of the technology, the processes, the people? What are some of the common denominators that help you navigate there?
Yeah, so to tie neuroplasticity into this, and I will in fact answer the question, it's about sort of being able to see patterns that other people may not see, or recognizing that there are concepts or happenings or dynamics within a company that are very much related and impinging on one another that may not be intuitively obvious to everyone. So to answer the question, a lot of what happens is people will say, we've got a tech problem, and that's sort of this umbrella commentary around, we're not getting our products out on time. We're having issues with, aligning customer expectations with what we're building. It could be 1,000 different things. And they tend to point it as like, we got a tech problem. The reality in most cases is you don't have a tech problem. You've got either a people problem or you've got a process problem, or in almost all cases, you've got what I like to think of as an alignment problem, like I was describing before, where these pieces are not playing well in concert, and that's the root cause. And it can be messy and it can feel intractable, but it's not intractable. It's just a matter of being able to tease it apart, see all the different pieces, and know where to attack. And usually the plan of attack is not let's go fix all the tech. It's let's go fix the alignment between the tech and the
right. So
product.
tell me this: how often do you get pushback because people really want it to be a tech problem and they don't want to dig into the other stuff? Or do you think that they're pretty much okay? We're just glad we figured it out.
I think the answer is it depends who you're talking to. If a CTO, a chief technology officer, were to bring me into a situation, then they don't want to hear that it's a people problem or a process. They like focus on tech. But that's usually not the case. It's more, working at a VC or a PE level or with a board or with a CEO. They just know there's a problem and it has something to do with technology and product and, all this sort of thing. And they just want someone who can figure it out. If the answer comes back, like, you're on a good path with your technology strategy, with what you've built. The problem is that it's not quite aligned with what sales thinks they're selling and what the long-term product strategy is. So it's all about features. It's not about the platform that you've built.
Right.
They just want someone who can get in and figure that out. And it's a lot of teasing things apart to get there.
Yeah, and this idea that so once you ascertain that there's a people issue or a communication knot or something, then convincing people that you have a lot of control of your own thought processes, that is often a stumbling block for me as a coach and a consultant. Like, people are like, what do you taught? Like, no, they did this, or this person did that, or at the team meeting we have this dynamic, and sometimes it takes a little bit of effort to get people to take responsibility for their role in co-creating whatever that dynamic is. Like, it's not about it's your fault, it's his fault, it's my fault. It's about we're co-creating this thing, and I have this communication pattern with myself that has gotten stronger and stronger because I've kept practicing it, right? So back to neuroplasticity, like what we don't understand sometimes is that we have these thought patterns, we practice them, they work for us for whatever reason. We practice them, they get stronger. These are neurons firing. And if we choose different thoughts, we fire different neurons. And if we practice those, they get stronger, and then we're more apt to have those same thoughts. But this is a concept not everybody gets. And that's kind of what neuroplasticity is.
Yeah. So let's bring that back into the conversation. So I think you definitely touched on it. The way I like to think about it is, as adults, as we get increasingly older and more serious about our lives and the work that we do, unbeknownst to us, I think most people don't notice, you tend to get into a rut of, like, a well-worn path of, this is how I perceive the world, this is how I think, this is how my internal narrative works, how I talk to myself about what I'm trying to do. And there is vast horizons off to the sides that are left unexplored because we get into this rut. And I like to always bring it back to the contrast between adulthood and childhood. The key thing about childhood, neuroplasticity, like the actual physiological neuroplasticity, is at its peak when we are young and growing and forming new experiences. And, the way kids will often connect things in the world that adults will look at and go, well, wow, I never would have thought of that. There's a reason for that. They are far more flexible than we are. And there is this sense that is critically important to me of having a childlike view of the world, to be contrasted with childish, right? Which was
Right.
generally has negative
Different.
connotations.
Mhm.
But childlike, to me, refers to this notion of seeing all the possibilities, creativeness, playfulness, not being told that something's impossible, or not telling yourself that something's impossible, but just
Yeah.
like, saying, I'm going to do this, wildly improbable thing. Why not? Well, because I think that I can. And as adults, that all starts to get squashed and all these filters get built up and we get stuck in our rut. And neuroplasticity, and there are certain things that people can do to practice it and to enhance it and to foster it, enables you to get out of that rut, whether it's a narrative, whether it's a particular point of view, whether it's sort of your own foregone conclusions about why things are the way they are. And it's something that I've been practicing for quite some time, and I do think I tend to maintain a very childlike view of the world, which I think helps me quite a lot in my work practice, where I'm coming at it, sort of like, rather than this one well-worn track, it's kind of like
Right.
fresh pile of snow, no tracks in it at all. I can go anywhere I want, and
Yeah.
I do, and I tend to see things that other people might not.
Yeah, it's a curiosity piece. And by the way, in our time together as musicians, it that's kind of, we were in that space all the time as creatives in a band together. But people sometimes put that in a box and say, "Oh, well, they're musicians, they're creatives. That's different." It's not.
No.
You can apply the same concepts to everyday life in whatever walk of life you're in.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad you brought up the childlike sense of wonder. And if anyone is fascinated with the concept of wonder, you have to check out my dear friend Jeffrey Davis and trackingwonder.com.
Oh, I will.
He dedicates himself to this concept of wonder, which is just beautiful. And he's a mentor of mine. But this childlike, it goes so deep. So oftentimes when we talk about neuroplasticity, we think, oh, it's just going to be so hard because we're older now. It isn't we're not as malleable, to your point, Dan, but we can, I mean, I'm living proof of that. Like, you can change your experience by changing the narrative. Starts with words, the words in your head, the words you tell yourself affect everything. And so, like, if you just change your internal narrative, it's like everybody has that power right this minute to do it. And you just do that consistently. Like, oh, what if I contemplated a completely different career? Like, can you imagine? Like, if everybody, like, so many times we shut ourselves down before we even like give any permission to contemplate something. But that mere contemplation puts you in a curiosity space where different things can happen and you start going down a different path.
Yeah.
But we're just so afraid of disruption and uncertainty, and it's yeah.
So I've been through exactly that recently when I mentioned a few minutes ago that I decided it was time to kind of hang up the, what did I say, cleats, hat, whatever the metaphor, the thing you hang up,
Yes.
and do something a little bit different. Now, yes, my advisory practice is related to my prior career, but it's not a linear progression. It's like, it's time to do something a little bit different. And one of the things that got me there, getting back to sort of neuroplasticity and possibilities and changing the narrative and all that, is this realization that, like, you know what? There kind of are no rules. There are no like, a lot of people get very career focused, careerism, and the reality is there's kind of two different problems there. There's a financial problem, or not problem, but there's a financial need, which is, I need to keep the roof over my head and put food on the table and like all the things that I want to do. But it doesn't mean that you have to keep doing the same thing over and over and over to get there, right? And as soon as you look at it like, I've got the financial thing I need to do and, life and stability and all that, but then what is it that I'm actually doing all day in order to achieve that? It's like, I can change that. And I have, and it's been fun.
It's fun.
Yeah.
I mean, but fun is like, let's pause on that. It's fun. So, we're like we're not great at meta. We're not great at being meta. I mean,
Right.
we're not awesome at noticing ourselves, as humans. We tend to believe our thoughts, which can be problematic if we behave based on the belief, because sometimes they're based on fictional narratives.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to believe our thoughts, but we don't tend to notice them. And if we do notice them, sometimes we knee jerk to judging them. If we can get in the practice of metacognition, of really noticing our thoughts and then saying, is that based on fact or is that based on conjecture? Because if it's not based on fact, why am I believing it and then acting on it? So let's put it in a real-time example. To your point, I'm in this job, I'm in a career, I'm in an industry, I'm on a path. What if I contemplated a different path? You'll be living in a box outside. We go from point A to point Z, right? We catastrophize because that's what we do. But what if we were to pull the thread and say, okay, what's the first step? What's the worst that can happen? What's the step after that? What's the worst then you're training your brain a little bit, right? You're dipping your toe into this neuroplasticity pool, like just firing differently and seeing. And oftentimes when people start doing that, then the curiosity, the sense of wonder, it really can materialize into something different, and you can self-actualize that way.
Yeah. I think it's like you got to get yourself to jump slightly out of your comfort zone.
Yes.
Take a look around, go, ooh, fun. Jump a little, like it doesn't have to be all one fell swoop, like, jump out of the airplane, with the parachute and hope.
Yeah.
It can be steps at a time, which is more or less kind of, the path that I've gone down. And yeah, you realize with these incremental steps, like, oh, this can work. Oh, this is fun. Oh, okay, I know what to do next. And then the narrative changes to one of
the narrative changes,
and looking forward to what's the next step in this process.
Right. Like I often guide clients to, what is it that sparks you? And people say, oh, well, I like to, and they say some pastime or hobby that they have compartmentalized outside of their professional life as a treat. And that's different. And then we start talking about work-life balance, which makes my head hurt because it doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
And you are who you are everywhere you are.
Right.
So what do you love to do? And this is aligned with neuroplasticity, I believe, because what do you like to do? What gets you excited? How can you integrate that into the work you do? What's the intersection point? So I want to hear yours because you're extremely creative guy. And I mean, I know you a long time. I'm pretty creative. I love, writing music. I love performing. I love helping people. Okay. So years ago when I started this platform, I was like, I'm going to help people with fear. Well, what I really wanted to do was help in any way I could. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward 6 years now, I get on stages and speak. Intersection, performer, want to help where it wasn't obvious. It was only through channels of trying things that I realized, when I'm standing in front of a group of people and I'm speaking and they get something out of it, wow, that really sparks me up. Right. So I did a lot of consulting but that's not one-to-one coaching, not my favorite, but I did it, So the point of the story is you have to keep pulling the thread to see what it is that lights you up. And then you can find those intersection points. So tell me a story for you about the intersection points that brought you here.
Well, hopefully it's not too self-serving. It's actually fairly similar, is what I have realized over the years, and what I have, not just my internal narrative, but people have consistently said to me over decades, is you're always looking to be helpful. One thing that has happened for me over the years for various reasons that I think I understand is my ego has diminished quite a lot. So to the point where, what I mean is, it's not about me. Like, I don't need to be the one in the limelight, taking the credit, having all the glory. I guess in the business world, we talk a lot about things like servant leadership and things like that. But my realization was, I like to be a helper. I like to be a coach. I like to be an advisor. I like to be a mentor. And there's a business there in the world of tech and product and process and all that, because so many people need help with this.
Yep.
So my sort of long time notion of being help, support, I mean, even going back to the musician thing, like, I'm primarily a bassist, and anyone who understands kind of the dynamics of a band, the bass and the drums, the rhythm section are generally there to support and provide a scaffold for a lot of what else is going on, right? The melody, the structure of the song, the lyrics, the guitars, the keys, whatever it happens to be. And like, I didn't realize that until fairly recently, but like, my path in the music world leads to the same place, which is providing a support structure. And that's kind of what led me to, like, I should be doing advisory work, right? Because I don't need to be the CTO with my picture on the website and all the important things I've done. It's more like, I can make a very good living helping people find success where they need assistance doing
And
so.
it feels good to you. It feels good inside.
Yeah.
Like, there's consistency. It's just, and so for people that are watching, I think this is one of the biggest takeaways. Like, if you take the time, if you give yourself the permission to want things, and then you start to systematically iterate towards those things, and with a curiosity mindset, with a growth mindset, you will discover more about yourself. And in the process, you're going to reframe your thought patterns, your belief systems, your brain, and you can change a lot of your life, right? So if people take away anything from this, I hope they take that away, because it's not just you and I, Dan, established, entrepreneurs that have, this privilege of working for ourselves. It's not, that's not what it is. It's
Right.
We both made choices to pursue the path that we wanted with a growth mindset, even when it might have been more comfortable for me. I was a writer and I was making a decent amount, blogging, for different clients. Wasn't sparking me up.
Yep.
It was a tough transition to say, I'm going to do this now and not that. But do this and not that is a powerful place to be. And so I think that's what you're talking about. And tell me about when you work with companies, like, what's your differentiator? Kind of, is it that you approach it with this creative mind, intersection with your tech savviness, or how would you describe?
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Is you did this sort of at the top of the chat here, like this notion that, I come out of tech, I'm a tech guy, but the realization that solving tech problems usually aren't tech problems that need to be solved. It's usually a bunch of other things. I mean, it could be. There are cases where it's like, yes, the problems with the technology, we need a different development team, or like, a different, whatever it is. But most of the time that's not the case. And it's this web, this interplay. And, that's sort of where I realized my sweet spot is not, just being, I can be the tech geek. I know how to do that, but I generally don't lead with it. Because I find most of the time that's not the crux of the problem.
Yeah. And, it's such a funny thing, but when we talk about tech, or we talk about, say, something that's not working, an app or some sort of platform, like when we get stuck in that rut you talked about earlier, in our thinking, it's kind of like an app running in the background, of your brain, and it drains your battery. It drains your battery. So, if you can do an update, like reframe your thinking, tap into your neuroplasticity, you're going to fuel yourself instead of sap yourself.
So I think that's critically important. This notion, we don't even notice it. It's just part of our core humanness.
Yep.
There is a never-ending internal narrative. People talk to and with themselves orders of magnitude more than they talk with anyone else, right, over the course of their lifetime. But you don't generally notice that it's going on because it's so embedded in sort of our kind of how our brains work. The quick PSA, for anyone who's listening, who's like, yeah, neuroplasticity sounds great. Like, how do I do that? Like, there are a lot of practical things that people can practice to achieve greater neuroplasticity as an adult. For example, meditation, breath work, certain types of exercise, music, art, dance, cognitive behavioral therapy. Don't want to get into it too much here, but certain psychedelics.
Yep.
All of these things are known to help foster new connections in the brain. One of the most interesting things, and this is a topic for a whole other discussion, one of the things that most of these activities have in common is they force you into the moment. So you're not busy thinking about the past or the future. You are only in the now. And that seems to be when all the connectivity happens. So like, meditation, just take that as an example. That's a biggie. You go Google this and you're going to find, how do I improve neuroplasticity? You're going to see it over and over and over. And, music, art, dance, same thing. It's about kind of quieting the internal voice and bringing the filter down and letting the connections in your brain reestablish themselves or, basically grow new ones.
Yeah. And so as an actionable item for people, like, okay, I'd love to, dabble with some psychedelics, maybe not today. I'd love to meditate. I don't know how. Like, okay, something actionable, the audience, you can do right now. And I would challenge you and invite you to do this, people watching. Choose descriptors for yourself. Five descriptors that are not terribly complimentary, that you might knee jerk to, weak, less than, whatever. 5. Then choose the opposite of them times 20. Just 5. So bold, impactful, confident, whatever. And then speak those to yourself out loud a couple, 3 times a day. Speak those to yourself. When you do that language, use of language, you're accessing that part of your brain, you're firing both hemispheres. You are, don't look now, you are firing differently. You are, this is the simplest of acts that can start, sort of pave that way. If everything else seems just too overwhelming, like I have to learn how to meditate, I have to, learn how to breathe now, I have to, do that 3 times a day for a while, for a couple of weeks, and see what happens. It's not a leap to start this process, is what I'm trying to tell you. And Dan, what you're saying about, letting it quiet. So when you let your brain go idle, which people resist, I have to be busy all the time, I have to be accomplishing something all the time. Well, guess what? When you let your brain go idle, you are accomplishing something, because then you activate the default mode network of your brain. And when that's activated, you are in creative and problem solving mode. Like when you're in the shower and suddenly you realize the problem, how to solve the problem, get an idea. When you're driving, suddenly you get an idea. So it's possible. If people take away nothing else, this is possible.
Oh, it's more than possible. I mean, it's absolutely achievable. You just need to focus on it.
You just need to focus on it. So Dan, we have a minute. I want to please share with everyone how to get in touch with you the best way. So people
my business website is intersectadvisory.com. My email address, not surprisingly, is dan@intersectadvisory.com. That is the easiest way to get in touch with me.
If you're off the rails,
we'll get you back on.
I don't know. I'm mirrored. So thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Nancy, Dan, it's been a pleasure to have you. We'll have to come back again and talk about psychedelics, but that'll be a different thing for a different audience.
Absolutely.
Come back next month for the next episode. If you have questions in the meantime that you would like me to address, please send them to nancy@nancyrberger.com. Thanks again. Thanks, Dan, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks, Nancy.
Bye-bye.